the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're doing something a bit focused. We're really digging into just one source, an article covering some, pretty intense recent events and official statements out of Los Angeles.
That's right.
The main topic is this reported unrest, specifically linked to immigration enforcement, and then the official discussion around potential military responses.
Including different branches, which is interesting.
Exactly. And our mission, really, for this deep dive isn't just to read the article. It's to carefully pull out the key information reported in this specific source, the quotes, the actions described, the context it gives, but also to look at how this source presents it all, the language it uses, how it connects the dots between, say, an event and an official reaction.
And, it's really vital we frame this properly by looking at the source itself. The article we're diving into is from townhall.com. It's generally known as a conservative news and commentary site. Now, that context is, it's pretty important because it definitely shapes the specific language and the framing we're going to see.
Okay.
So our goal here, just to be clear, is purely analytical. We want to understand precisely what this source is reporting and how it's reporting it. We need to maintain neutrality on the political viewpoints expressed within it. We're essentially treating the article as a document, extracting its narrative and the details it provides.
Got it. Okay, so let's unpack this then. Let's dive right into what the article actually lays out. It seems to start pretty strongly, bringing in a quote attributed to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Yes, exactly. The source immediately highlights this statement reportedly from Hegseth. According to this article, he's quoted making a pretty striking conditional threat.
Conditional how?
Suggesting that active duty U.S. Marines could potentially be sent to Los Angeles to deal with the unrest if the National Guard proves insufficient.
Wow, okay. And the language the article attributes to Hegseth, how it describes the situation, the unrest, it sounds quite strong.
Oh, it is. Very strong. The source quotes Hegseth directly saying this. The violent mob assaults on ICE and federal law enforcement are designed to prevent the removal of criminal illegal aliens from our soil. A dangerous invasion facilitated by criminal cartels, aka foreign terrorist organizations, and a huge national security risk.
Dangerous invasion. Huge national security risk. I mean, those are powerful phrases the article is attributing to a top defense official right at the start.
Absolutely.
And how does the article report Hegseth connecting this situation or the response back to the president?
Well, according to the source, Hegseth's quoted statement goes on to say, under President Trump, violence and destruction against federal agents and federal facilities will not be tolerated. It's common sense.
Okay.
So the article presents Hegseth explicitly linking the federal response directly to the president's stance on this.
All right. So given that strong language and the link to the president, what immediate action does the article report Hegseth announcing?
The source quotes Hegseth stating, quite unequivocally, the Defense Department is mobilizing the National Guard immediately to support federal law enforcement in Los Angeles.
Immediately. Okay.
Yeah.
So the article first gives us this very stark characterization of the unrest, connects it to the president, reports Hegseth announcing the immediate National Guard mobilization, and then it brings in that potential escalation involving the Marines, that conditional part.
That's exactly the sequence in the article. It quotes Hegseth adding that specific condition we talked about. And if violence continues, active duty Marines at Camp Pendleton will also be mobilized. They are on high alert.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's quite interesting how the source presents this as a sort of potential two-step response. First the Guard, and then, if needed, active duty Marines from a very specific base, Camp Pendleton.
And the article mentions, I think, that Hegseth's statement came shortly after President Trump signed something related to this. How does the source actually sequence those events?
Yes, it does. The article explicitly places Hegseth's statement right after reporting that President Donald Trump signed a declaration activating the National Guard.
Okay.
So the sequencing in the article really suggests Hegseth's comments are a direct follow-up or maybe an elaboration on the president's action.
Got it. And the article also includes some details from a White House statement about this declaration, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How does the source describe what that statement covered?
It does. The source provides some excerpts from what it identifies as the White House statement. It says the statement specifically addresses violent mobs,
Okay.
reportedly attacking ICE, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers and other federal law enforcement agents. And these agents were, according to the statement as reported, carrying out what the statement calls basic deportation operations in Los Angeles, California.
Basic deportation operations. And similar to the Hegseth quote reported earlier, how does this White House statement, as presented in this article, characterize those operations? What kind of language does it use?
Well, the White House statement, again, according to the article, describes these operations as essential to halting and reversing the invasion of illegal criminals into the United States.
There's that word again, invasion.
Exactly. We see that term appearing in both the reported Hegseth quote and the White House statement, according to the source. It's definitely a key piece of language the article highlights.
It certainly seems like a recurring theme in the official statements reported here. What else did the White House statement say, according to the article, about the leadership in California?
The source reports that the White House statement included this line: "In the wake of this violence, California's feckless Democrat leaders have completely abdicated their responsibility to protect their citizens."
Feckless. Okay, so the source is including the reported statement, drawing a pretty sharp contrast between the federal response and the state leadership's approach.
Yes, that contrast is definitely presented in the statement quoted by the source.
And the action mentioned in the White House statement, does it align with what Hegseth reportedly said about the immediate step being taken?
It does, yes. The White House statement, as reported in the article, says, "That is why President Trump has signed a presidential memorandum deploying 2,000 National Guardsmen to address the lawlessness that has been allowed to fester."
Lawlessness. So the source ties the presidential action, the deployment of the Guard, directly to addressing what the statement itself calls lawlessness.
The article is really zeroing in on these specific strong terms used by the officials it quotes.
It seems to be, yes, highlighting that particular vocabulary.
And how does the White House statement, as presented in the article, kind of wrap up? What's the concluding message regarding the administration's view on the violence?
The article quotes the statement concluding with this: "The Trump administration has a zero-tolerance policy for criminal behavior and violence, especially when that violence is aimed at law enforcement officers trying to do their jobs."
It continues, quoting, "These criminals will be arrested and swiftly brought to justice." And then it finishes by quoting the statement, asserting that the commander-in-chief will ensure the laws of the United States are executed fully and completely.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize how this one source puts it all together. It reports violent unrest targeting federal agents during deportations. It immediately follows that with these specific, very strong characterizations of the unrest from officials quoted in the article using terms like invasion, national security risk.
Lawlessness.
Right, very loaded terms. Then it details the reported immediate deployment of the National Guard, citing both a presidential memorandum and the Defense Secretary's statement.
Correct.
And crucially, it presents that conditional threat of using active duty Marines if the situation doesn't de-escalate.
Exactly. And what's really, I think, illuminated when we examine the single source closely is how it actually constructs this narrative.
As though.
Well, it connects the reported events on the ground in LA directly to these high-level official statements and the resulting actions. It uses the officials' own strong language, as reported, to frame the situation as extremely severe, an invasion, a national security risk.
Right, building the justification.
Precisely, thereby building the reported justification for the military response described. It shows a progression, moving from the National Guard to the potential conditional use of active duty forces like the Marines from Camp Pendleton. The article frames this whole sequence as a direct consequence of the reported violence.
Okay.
And also, significantly, the purported failure of local leadership, as that's presented in the White House statement it includes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Understanding these specific details and really paying attention to the precise language used within this particular source, townhall.com, it feels incredibly valuable. It's not just about getting the reported facts. It gives you, the listener, insight into a specific official perspective and the reported government actions. It shows how a situation is being framed and justified by certain officials, at least as reported by this particular outlet. It's like looking at the reported events through one specific Quite powerful lens.
Absolutely. And this raises, I think, an important question for you, the listener, to consider, based only on how this article presents the information we've just discussed.
Okay.
Given the specific details reported here, the description of the unrest, the reasons explicitly given for federal intervention, like national security and invasion, and the way the source contrasts the immediate action of the National Guard with that conditional threat involving active duty Marines from Camp Pendleton, what does this report, as constructed by this source, suggest to you about the dynamics playing out between civil unrest and federal authority? And perhaps more specifically, how does this source portray the distinct roles of different types of military force National Guard versus active duty Marines in such a scenario? It's really about thinking how the article itself builds that particular picture.
That's a really powerful way to think about how information gets presented, not just what's presented. A lot to mull over there.
Definitely.
Well, thank you for diving deep into this source material with us today. As always, keep exploring these complex issues and, importantly, the different ways they are reported and framed.
In the heart of this nation, under skies so blue, there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true. From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty.